Hi there, welcome back to the channel. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
The first thing I noticed when I walked into the officers' club was the smell of money trying very hard to smell like patriotism. Polished wood, brass plaques, crystal glasses. A string quartet in one corner, playing something expensive and forgettable. The kind of room where people said service while checking whether the shrimp was imported. My family loved places like that. They thought it made them look important. That night, the whole event was built around my younger sister, Sloane Miller. Her name was printed on the welcome board in gold script, like she had personally liberated a continent. A celebration of leadership and excellence. Sloane Miller. You would have thought she'd won a war. In reality, she had mastered something far more useful in our family, looking impressive in photographs, and talking like confidence was a substitute for character. I showed up in a dark blouse, plain slacks, and low heels. Clean, simple, forgettable. I had learned a long time ago that when people already decided what you were worth, overdressing only made them meaner. My mother took one look at me and sighed like I had arrived wrapped in a parking ticket. "Cassidy," she said, scanning me from head to toe, "you could have at least tried." I glanced at the room. Half the women were dressed like they were auditioning to marry a senator. I did try. I tried not to blind anyone with sequins. She didn't laugh. My mother rarely laughed at anything that didn't humiliate me. My father was near the bar telling the same story for the 10th time about how Sloane had always been the driven one. He said it with the pride of a man who had contributed nothing except genetics and bad financial decisions. Every few seconds he slapped a shoulder, nodded too hard, and accepted congratulations like he was the one being honored. Then there was Sloane. She stood in the center of the room in a white dress with sharp tailoring and a smile so polished it could cut glass. Men in uniform hovered around her. Civilian donors hovered around her. My parents hovered around her. She touched elbows, tilted her head, laughed on cue, and accepted praise like tips from the universe. And me, I got mistaken for staff before I even made it to the second champagne tray. One of Sloane's guests, a woman with diamonds the size of moral compromise, handed me her empty flute and said, "Sweetheart, another one." I looked at the glass, then at her. "I'm not staff." She blinked. Oh, she didn't apologize. People like that never apologized. They just edited reality in real time and moved on. My Aunt Lorraine walked up just in time to hear it and gave me that fake sympathetic smile families use when they enjoy your embarrassment more than they should. "Well," she said, patting my arm, "you do blend in." That got a small laugh from the two women beside her. I smiled back. That's still better than standing out for the wrong reasons. One of them choked on her drink. Lorraine pretended not to hear me. I should explain something. In my family, Sloane was the headline, and I was the fine print. She was ambition, I was utility. She was the daughter you bragged about at galas. I was the one you called when bills needed paying, paperwork needed fixing, or somebody needed to quietly absorb blame. Nobody in that room knew much about me, and my family preferred it that way. To them, I was the underachieving older sister who had drifted into logistics work, stayed mostly unavailable, dressed like a woman with no social life, and never gave a clear answer about where her money came from. They liked that version of me. It was easier to mock. What they did not like was uncertainty, and I had become very good at giving them just enough of it to stay ignored. I moved toward the side of the room near a display, honoring several decorated families with military ties. At the center of it all was a framed photo of my grandfather in uniform, back straight eyes, hard ribbons lined like a warning. General Warren Miller. The only person in this family who understood that honor was something you carried when nobody was clapping. Under the photo sat a ceremonial compass and an engraved watch that had once belonged to him. At least replicas were sitting there. The originals had gone missing months ago. I knew exactly who had taken them. Cassidy. I turned and there was Sloane smiling for the room and sharpening knives for me. Up close, she smelled like expensive perfume and victory bought on credit. She reached up and touched my collar, straightening it with two neat fingers, as if she were being a caring little sister in front of witnesses. From a distance, it probably looked sweet. Then she leaned close enough for only me to hear her. "You'll always be beneath me." There it was, not a joke, not sisterly banter, not even anger, just certainty. Pure, clean contempt. I held her gaze. I could feel half a lifetime of swallowed replies pressing against the back of my teeth. Every family dinner where I was dismissed. Every emergency I quietly fixed. Every debt I covered. Every time I was expected to disappear so she could sparkle uninterrupted. Sloane smiled wider, still adjusting my collar for the audience. "Try not to look so stunned," she whispered. "You're making this awkward." Then she stepped back and raised her voice just enough for the people nearest us to hear. "My sister has always been supportive in her own way." That got a few polite chuckles. Supportive. That was one word for it. Financially useful was another. Sloane turned smoothly toward a cluster of guests and lifted her glass. "It's still unofficial, of course, but we're expecting some very exciting news soon. There's talk of an honorary captain appointment attached to the foundation board." My mother clasped her hands. "We're all just so proud." My father laughed too loudly. "She's been destined for this." A man near the bar asked, "And what does your sister do again?" There was a pause, a tiny one, but I felt it. Sloane tilted her head toward me, smile intact. "Cassidy helps with operations, very behind the scenes, very practical. Practical. That was the family word they used when they wanted to say unimpressive without sounding cruel in public." "Oh," the man said, already losing interest. "Administrative." Before I could answer, my Aunt Lorraine jumped in. "Something like that." The group laughed. Not a huge laugh. Not cartoon villain stuff. Just that clean little social laugh rich people use when they've all silently agreed someone in the room matters less. And that one landed harder. Because humiliation always hits worst when it's tidy. I stood there with my drink in my hand and felt my pride crack in places nobody could see. Not explode, not collapse all at once. Just buckle quietly under the weight of being reduced again in front of people who had no idea how much of that room had been indirectly funded by my silence. Sloane lifted her glass toward me like she was being generous. "To family," she said. I almost laughed. "To family, sure. To the same family that treated me like unpaid infrastructure with a pulse. To the same family that had no problem using my money, my time, or my loyalty as long as I kept my head down and made Sloane look taller." I set my glass down before I did something entertaining. And right there, while my sister basked in applause she had not earned and my parents glowed beside her like proud shareholders in a collapsing company. "I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the person everybody underestimated in the room because you looked too plain, too quiet, or too useful to be dangerous? And did they only respect you after it was far too late? Tell me in the comments." A waiter passed by. Someone on stage tapped a microphone. My mother waved at me from across the room, motioning for me to come stand farther back in the family photo, which was honestly impressive. Even now, she could organize disrespect with military precision. I took one step toward the edge of the ballroom and felt a faint vibration against my ribcage. Not my public phone. The other one. I kept my face still. Slowly, carefully, I moved my hand inside the inner lining of my bag and touched the compact satellite handset hidden beneath a folded shawl. No one around me noticed. Why would they invisible daughters have certain advantages? The screen lit for half a second. Encrypted string, priority formatting, internal key sequence. I angled the display just enough to read it. Package confirmed, authorization green, standby for phase 1. I read it once, then again. Everything in me went quiet. The sting in my chest didn't disappear, but it got pushed aside by something colder, cleaner, more useful. My breathing steadied. My shoulders loosened. I looked up across the ballroom at Sloane, who was now laughing beside the podium with one hand resting on her mother's arm, like she already owned the room, the family, and the next 10 years. For the first time that night, I stopped seeing her as my sister. I saw her as a subject moving inside a timeline, a problem with an expiration date. She caught me looking and smirked, probably expecting hurt, maybe even submission. What she saw instead made her smile falter for half a second. Because my eyes had changed. And once they changed, they were never going back. I slipped the phone back into my bag and kept my expression neutral as the applause swelled again behind me. My sister was still smiling under the lights, still collecting admiration like it was interest on a debt I had been paying for over a decade. And just like that, the room faded a little. Not physically, it was still loud, still polished, still full of people pretending success was something you could inherit. But in my head, everything pulled backward, years collapsing in on themselves, until I was standing somewhere else entirely. 10 years earlier, I was the one in uniform. Not the kind you wore to impress donors, the kind you earned before sunrise in places where nobody cared who your parents were or how good you looked holding a glass. I had been halfway through the academy when my father called. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I was okay. He said, "Cassidy, I need help." That was the first time. Back then, I still believed that meant something real. I took the call outside the barracks, standing under a flickering light, while my classmates were inside preparing for morning drills. My father's voice sounded thinner than I had ever heard it. Not emotional, just smaller. The business hit a rough patch, he said. That was his version. What he meant was he had over-leveraged everything on a deal he didn't understand, trusted people who saw him coming, and lost more money in 6 months than most families saw in a lifetime. How much, I asked. There was a pause. Papers shuffled. 200,000, he said, like saying it softer would make it smaller. I remember staring at the ground, calculating what that meant. Not just the number, but the consequence. Bankruptcy, legal exposure, reputation gone. The kind of collapse that didn't just take him down, it took the whole family with it. "I'll handle it," I said. I don't think he even asked how. That should have been my first clue. I withdrew from the academy 2 weeks later. Officially, I pursued private sector logistics work. That was the story. The reality was a little more complicated. The work I took didn't show up on resumes. It didn't come with titles you could explain at dinner parties. It came with contracts that required silence operations, that required precision, and results that couldn't afford mistakes. I learned quickly how to move assets across borders without attracting attention, how to read people in seconds, how to anticipate problems before they became disasters, how to finish jobs without leaving loose ends, and most importantly, how to get paid. The first time I transferred money back home, it felt like I had fixed something. My father called me that night, voice suddenly full again. "You saved us," he said. My mother cried. Sloan didn't say thank you. She asked if I could help her with something small. That was how it started. One payment became another, then a pattern. My father stabilized his business just enough to make new mistakes. My mother adjusted her lifestyle like the crisis had never happened. And Sloan upgraded. Better clothes, better events, better friends, always better, never enough. Every time something went wrong, I got the call. "Cassidy, it's just temporary. Cassidy, we just need a bridge. Cassidy, you're the only one we can count on." And every time I wired the money, not because I was naive, not after the first year. I did it because I had made a decision. If the family was going to survive, someone had to carry the weight without asking for credit. Someone had to make sure the foundation didn't crack while everyone else decorated the walls. I chose to be that person. I just didn't realize I was also choosing to be invisible. The worst part wasn't the money. It was what they started to believe because of it. To them, I wasn't the one holding things together. I was just available, reliable, quiet, replaceable, a function. The moment it really clicked for me happened about 3 years ago. I had come back to the house unannounced. Rare for me, but I had just finished a contract and had a few days before the next one. I figured I'd check in, make sure nothing was on fire, maybe remind myself what normal looked like. The driveway was empty except for one thing: a car I had never seen before. Low, sleek, expensive in a way that didn't care who noticed. The kind of car that made statements before the engine even started. I stood there for a second doing the math. Then I walked inside. Music was playing, not loud, just enough to feel curated. My mother was in the living room scrolling through something on her tablet, completely at ease. "Cassidy," she said, surprised, but not unhappy. "You should have told us you were coming." "I like surprises," I said. "Whose car is that?" She smiled. "Sloan's." Of course it was. I found her in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, keys in her hand, looking very pleased with herself. "You like it?" she asked, dangling the keys. "It's nice," I said. "Paid in cash." She laughed. "Don't be dramatic." "Then how?" She shrugged like it didn't matter. I handled it. That answer didn't sit right. Not because I didn't think she could get a car. She could. People like Sloan always found ways to make things appear legitimate long enough to pass inspection. It was the timing. We had just covered a major shortfall for my father 2 months earlier. There wasn't supposed to be extra money floating around. "Where did the money come from?" I asked. She rolled her eyes. "Why do you care? It's my business." "Because I just moved a significant amount to keep Dad afloat," I said, keeping my voice even. "So unless you've suddenly developed a new revenue stream, I'd like to understand how this makes sense." She pushed off the counter, irritation flashing for a second before the smile came back. You always do this. You make everything sound like an audit. Answer the question, Sloan. She hesitated. Just long enough. Then she said it. I sold something. My chest tightened. What? She waved a hand casual. Old stuff. Things nobody was using. I didn't like that answer either. I walked past her down the hallway straight to my grandfather's study. The display case was open, empty. The compass was gone. The watch was gone. For a second, I just stood there. Not angry, not yet, just still. Because some things aren't about money. Those weren't decorations. They were history, legacy. The last pieces of a man who had actually earned the respect everyone in this house pretended to understand. I turned back slowly. You sold them, I said. Sloan leaned against the doorway like this was a minor inconvenience. Relax, it's not like anyone was using them. They weren't yours. They were sitting there collecting dust. They were our grandfather's. And now they're an asset that got converted into something useful, she snapped, finally dropping the soft tone. That's how the world works, Cassidy. I looked at her. Really looked. At the ease, the entitlement, the complete lack of hesitation. You sold his legacy for a car, I said. She rolled her eyes again. It's just an object. No, I said quietly. It wasn't. For a moment the room felt smaller. Then she smiled. That same polished, sharp smile she used in public. The one that made everything sound reasonable if you weren't paying attention. You're being emotional, she said. Like always. I didn't respond, because I knew something she didn't. That morning before I came home, I had cleared the final outstanding debt tied to my father's business. $500,000. Gone. No announcement, no celebration, no family meeting, just a transaction. I had closed the last hole they were standing over. Sloan had no idea. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it personal. You don't actually do anything for this family, she said. You show up, disappear, and act like you're some kind of hero. But when it comes to real impact, that's me. I let that sit. Every word, every assumption, every layer of ignorance wrapped in confidence. Because arguing would have been a waste. People like Sloan didn't need truth. They needed consequences. I walked past her without another word. Back through the hallway, past the empty display case, past the life-sized photo of a man who would have seen right through all of this. By the time I reached the front door, I had already made a decision. Not to confront, not to explain, just to remember. Because one day, all of this, every payment, every insult, every quiet correction I made behind the scenes was going to matter. And when it did, I wouldn't need to say a single word. I closed the front door behind me and stood there for a second, hand still on the handle, letting the silence settle. Inside that house, everything looked normal. Clean floors, expensive furniture, family photos arranged like proof of something solid. But I knew better. I had just seen exactly how far Sloan was willing to go for convenience. And that changed the way I looked at everything, not emotionally, operationally. I didn't storm back in. I didn't confront her. That would have been pointless. People like Sloan didn't back down when challenged. They adapted, denied, and escalated. If I wanted the truth, I needed to stop asking for it. I needed to collect it. That night, I didn't stay at the house. I checked into a small hotel about 15 minutes away. Nothing fancy, no attention. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my secondary kit, and laid everything out piece by piece. Compact audio transmitters, passive signal relays, micro cameras the size of a shirt button, a modified router module that could piggyback on an existing network without triggering alerts. Standard tools, just not standard for family problems. I worked in silence, running through placement in my head. Entry points, blind spots, routine movement. My family wasn't careful. They never had to be. Nobody had ever forced them to think that way, which made this easy. The next morning I went back. No announcement, no warning. My mother was out. My father was in his study. Sloan was gone, probably at some meeting where she got to practice being important. Perfect. Cassidy, my father said when I stepped in. Didn't expect you back so soon. I forgot something, I said. He nodded, already distracted. Papers spread across his desk. Numbers that didn't scare him nearly as much as they should have. I moved through the house like I belonged there, because technically, I did. Living room first. A small device tucked behind the entertainment console, angled to pick up audio from the seating area. Kitchen next. Another under the island lip. Hallway one above the frame blending with the trim. Nothing obvious, nothing invasive enough to raise suspicion. Just enough. When I reached my grandfather's study again, I paused. The empty display case was still there. Clean, quiet, wrong. I set a device inside the back panel flush against the wood. That room mattered. Conversations there tended to be more honest. Then I moved upstairs. Sloane's room. I didn't rush. I never rushed. Her space was exactly what I expected. Organized, expensive, curated like everything else in her life. I didn't touch anything unnecessary. Just one device placed behind a decorative panel near her desk. Audio only. People reveal more when they think they're alone. By the time I was done, the house looked exactly the same. But now it listened. I left without saying goodbye. Back at the hotel, I set up the receiver and let the system run. Passive collection. No interference. No alerts. At first it was nothing. Background noise. Footsteps. My mother talking on the phone about seating arrangements. My father arguing with someone about a delayed payment. Then Sloane came home. Her heels clicked across the floor, sharp, confident like everything she did. A door closed. Silence for a moment. Then her voice. "Yeah, I'm inside." Different tone, less polished, more direct. I leaned forward slightly, adjusting the feed. "No, he won't question it," she said. "He signs whatever I put in front of him." I didn't move. My father, she was talking about my father. A second voice came through, faint but clear enough. Male, calm, professional in that detached way people use when they're used to bending rules for a living. "You need to make sure the paperwork is airtight," he said. "If your sister pushes back, she won't," Sloane cut in. "Cassidy doesn't push. That's her whole personality." There it was again, the version of me they had built. Convenient, passive, predictable. I let her keep talking. "We transfer the house into the trust," she continued. "Get Dad into assisted living, something nice, something that sounds respectable. Once that's done, she's out, legally clean." My grip tightened slightly on the edge of the table. She wasn't just talking about control. She was talking about removal. "Timeline," the man asked. 2 weeks, she said, maybe less. "I already have most of the documents ready. Just need the signature, forgery or coercion. Either way, illegal. Make sure the witness signatures line up," the man said, "and keep this quiet. If anyone starts asking questions, no one will," Sloane said. "You're overthinking it." There was a pause. Then he said something that shifted everything. "I'm not overthinking. I'm making sure this doesn't turn into a problem for Major Sterling." Silence, just for a second, but it was enough. My eyes narrowed slightly. "Major Sterling," I knew that name. Sloane spoke again, quieter this time. "Sterling's covered," she said. "He knows what he's doing." Of course he did. Major Daniel Sterling, her direct superior, decorated, connected, and recently flagged in an internal report I had reviewed months ago for financial irregularities tied to procurement channels. Nothing proven, just patterns. Until now. The man on the call continued. "As long as his name stays out of the paperwork." "We're fine." "It will," Sloane said. "This is my deal, your deal." "Right, because fraud always sounds cleaner when you say it like that." The call ended shortly after. I sat back in the chair, letting the silence return. Then I replayed it. Once, twice, 3 times. Every word, every detail. It wasn't just about the house. It wasn't just about pushing me out. This was a coordinated move. Legal manipulation, financial gain, abuse of authority. And Sterling was connected. That changed the scale. This wasn't a family problem anymore. This was an operation. I reached for a notepad and started writing. Names, dates, key phrases, cross-references to prior intel. Everything lined up faster than it should have, because I had seen this before. Different faces, same structure. People who thought proximity to power made them untouchable. People who forgot that systems don't fail because of noise. They fail because someone inside decides to pay attention. I looked at the recording one more time. Then I saved it, encrypted. Redundant backup. No mistakes, no gaps. And for the first time since I walked into that house, I felt something settle into place. Not anger, not even satisfaction, just clarity. Sloane thought she was removing me from the board. What she had actually done was put herself on mine. I closed the file, encrypted it, and shut the laptop. Then I sat there for a minute and did something I hadn't done in years. I slowed down. Because once you know what the other side is planning, the worst thing you can do is react like you know. You let them feel safe. You let them think they're smarter. You let them walk straight into something they don't even realize is already set. That meant one thing. I had to become exactly who Sloane believed I was. Quiet, passive, easy to move. The next time I showed up at the house, I didn't walk in like I owned anything. I hesitated at the door, just a fraction longer than necessary. Then I knocked. My mother opened it already halfway into a complaint. "Cassidy, you can't just come and go like I'm sorry," I said, cutting in gently. She paused. That worked. I stepped inside, shoulders, slightly rounded eyes, a little unfocused. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just off enough. I've been thinking, I added, like the words were heavier than they should be. My father looked up from the couch. About what? I let a small breath out. Everything. That word did a lot of work. My mother softened immediately. Well, that's good. Of course it was. Families like mine didn't want strong daughters. They wanted manageable ones. Sloane came down the stairs a second later, phone in hand. Expression already halfway between annoyed and amused. She looked at me, really looked, scanning, evaluating, trying to figure out if anything had changed. I made sure what she saw made her comfortable. Less eye contact, slower reactions. A hint of hesitation before speaking. "I think you were right," I said, glancing at her, then away. That got her attention. "About what?" she asked. "About me," I said. "I've been stuck. Not really contributing. Not thinking long term." Silence. Then my father nodded slowly. "That's a mature realization." My mother smiled like she had just fixed something. "We've been worried about you, Cassidy." Sloane didn't say anything right away. She just watched. And then slowly she smiled. There it was, recognition, not of growth, of opportunity. "I'm glad you're finally seeing it," she said, stepping closer. "It's not too late to make better decisions." "I want to," I said, and I meant it. Just not in the way she thought. The next few days I stayed visible. That was important. I didn't disappear like usual. I was around, quiet, helpful, slightly unsure of myself. In conversations I normally would have controlled. I let my mother explain things to me I already knew. I let my father correct me on topics he barely understood. And I let Sloane lead. She tested me, little things at first. "Cassidy, can you grab those files? Cassidy, can you handle this call? Cassidy, don't overthink it." I complied. Not eagerly, not resentfully, just obedient enough. By the third day, she stopped testing. She started using. That's when she brought out the paperwork. It happened in the afternoon. Kitchen table, clean surface, sunlight coming through the window like this was a normal conversation between sisters who trusted each other. Sloane placed a folder down in front of me. "I need your help with something," she said. I looked at it, then at her. "What is it?" "Just some insurance documentation," she said casually. "We're restructuring a few things. It's mostly administrative. Insurance. That word again. Always clean. Always harmless." I opened the folder, slowly flipping through the pages like I was trying to understand what I was looking at. Durable power of attorney, asset control clauses, transfer authority. I kept my face neutral, if anything slightly confused. "This is a lot," I said. "It looks worse than it is," Sloane replied quickly. "It just gives me the ability to manage certain things more efficiently. Dad doesn't want to deal with paperwork, and you've said yourself you're not great with this stuff." That was almost funny. I nodded slowly. "So this helps you handle everything?" "Exactly," she said. "It's just easier this way." Easier for her. Of course it was. I flipped another page, letting my finger trace the signature lines. Mine, my father's. Witnesses already prepared. "You've already talked to Dad about this?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "He trusts me." That part was true. Trust without understanding was one of my father's defining traits. "And this won't affect anything else?" I asked. Sloane smiled, patient now. Confident. "No, Cassidy, it just streamlines things. You're overthinking it." There it was again. Overthinking. That was her favorite word for anything she didn't want examined too closely. I let out a small breath and leaned back slightly. "I just don't want to mess anything up," I said. "You won't," she replied immediately. "That's why I'm here." Of course she was. To guide, to control, to take. I looked down at the pen she had placed next to the folder. Simple, black, nothing special. I picked it up, turning it slightly in my fingers, like I was buying time. In reality, I was aligning something much more precise. A signature isn't just a name, it's a key. And keys can be modified. Years ago, as part of a financial intelligence protocol, I had registered a variant of my signature. A subtle one, not something anyone would notice unless they were specifically trained to look for it. A shift in angle, a pressure change at a specific point. A small deviation that, when processed through the right system, triggered an alert. A honeypot. Use it in the wrong context, and it didn't just validate the document, it flagged it, hard, internally, quietly, exactly where it needed to go. Sloane leaned forward slightly. "Cassidy, it's just a form." I nodded. "I know," and then I signed. Not my standard signature. Not the one on my ID, the other one. Clean. Controlled, precise. Exactly as registered. I placed the pen down. Sloane glanced at the page, satisfied almost instantly. "See," she said, "that wasn't so hard." "No," I replied calmly, "it wasn't." She closed the folder, already moving on mentally, already thinking about the next step in her plan. Control, transfer, removal. She had no idea what she had just activated. My mother walked in a moment later. "Everything done," "Yep," Sloane said, holding up the folder. "Just wrapping things up." My father looked over from the living room. "Good. About time we got organized." Organized. That was one word for it. I stood up slowly, adjusting my sleeve. "Is there anything else you need from me?" I asked. Sloane shook her head. "Not right now." "Okay," I said. I turned toward the hallway, moving at the same measured pace I had used all week. No rush, no tension, just the version of me they were comfortable underestimating. But the moment I stepped out of their line of sight, something shifted. Not visibly, not dramatically, just enough. Because somewhere in a system they didn't even know existed, a flag had just been raised. And once that kind of signal went out, it didn't get ignored. I walked out of the hallway and didn't look back. Not at the kitchen, not at the folder, not at Sloane. Because once you've set something in motion, the smartest thing you can do is give it space to unfold. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. No sudden changes, no confrontations, no tension in the air, just routine. My mother kept planning small events like nothing had shifted. My father stayed buried in his paperwork, still pretending his business was stable. And Sloane, she moved differently, more confident, more decisive, like someone who believed the outcome was already guaranteed. That told me everything I needed to know. She thought she had control, which meant she was about to act. It happened on the third night. The storm rolled in just after sunset. Heavy rain, sharp wind, the kind of weather that made everything feel more dramatic than it needed to be. Water streaked down the tall windows, blurring the lights outside, turning the house into something sealed off from the world. I was in the living room when Sloane walked in, not alone. My parents followed her, both of them unusually serious. That was new. "Cassidy," Sloane said, her tone formal in a way I had never heard before inside this house. "We need to talk." I set my book down slowly. "Okay." We moved to the dining room. Same table we had used for holidays. Same chairs. Same polished surface that had seen years of quiet tension disguised as family dinners. Sloane didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table. Of course she did. My father cleared his throat. My mother clasped her hands together like she was preparing for something difficult, which usually meant something unfair. Sloane placed a stack of papers on the table, the same folder. "This is official now," she said. I looked at the documents without touching them. "Official?" I asked. She nodded. "Ownership transfer, asset consolidation, legal authority, all the right words, all in the wrong order." My father leaned forward slightly. "It's just restructuring, Cassidy. Nothing personal." Nothing personal. That was almost impressive. Sloane slid the top page toward me. "As of today, the house is under my management." There it was, clean, direct, controlled. And I asked. She met my eyes completely steady. "And that means I need you to move out, Lance." Not shock, not confusion, just a pause, long enough to let the words settle. My mother spoke next. Voice soft but firm in that way people use when they think they're being reasonable. "Cassidy, it's time," she said. "You've been holding on to things here that aren't really yours." I looked at her. "Like what?" She hesitated for half a second, then said it. "This house." I almost smiled. My father jumped in, trying to smooth it over. "You have to understand, Caitlin has a vision." Caitlin, he used her full name when he wanted to sound serious. "She's thinking long-term," he continued. Growth, stability, structure. And I'm not, I asked. He shifted slightly. You're different. There it was again. Different, the polite version of irrelevant. Sloane stepped closer to the table, placing both hands on the surface. You don't build anything, Cassidy, she said calmly. You just stay. You hold on to things. You don't move forward. I held her gaze. And you do, she smiled. I create opportunities. Of course she did. By taking what wasn't hers and calling it strategy. My mother reached into her purse and pulled something out, a folded bill. She placed it on the table in front of me. $100, she said, just to help you get started. For a second, I thought I misheard her. Then I looked down. A single bill, crisp, neatly folded, like this was a transaction, not a dismissal. My father nodded like this made sense. It's temporary. You'll figure something out. Figure something out. After everything, after 10 years of quietly keeping them afloat, after paying off debts they didn't even fully understand, after making sure this house still existed for them to sit in and push me out of, I picked up the bill, turned it slightly in my fingers. It felt light, lighter than it should have, not because of the amount, because of what it represented. This was how much they thought I was worth. Sloane watched me carefully, waiting, not for anger, for compliance. That was the version of me she trusted. I placed the bill back on the table, exactly where it had been. I won't need it, I said. My mother frowned slightly. Don't be stubborn, Cassidy. I'm not, I replied calmly. Sloane straightened. Then pack your things. No hesitation, no softness, just a decision delivered like an order. I stood up. No argument, no raised voice, nothing that would make them uncomfortable, because this wasn't the moment for that. This was the moment for clarity. I'll be out in 10 minutes, I said. Sloane blinked once. She hadn't expected that. Good. I walked upstairs, each step, steady, controlled. My room was exactly as I had left it. Minimal, clean, nothing unnecessary. I didn't pack much, just what I had brought, because I had never really lived there, not the way they thought. By the time I came back down, the storm had picked up, rain hitting the windows harder now, wind pushing against the house like it was testing the structure. Fitting. My parents were still in the dining room. Sloane had moved to the living room, standing near the window, phone in hand, already moving on. I walked past all of them. No goodbye, no final look. I opened the front door and stepped outside. The rain hit immediately, cold, sharp, real. The door closed behind me with a solid final sound. Not dramatic, just done. I stood there for a second looking at the house. Lights on in every room, warm, bright, full of people celebrating something they didn't understand. Inside I could already hear movement. Voices, glasses, music starting again. A party, of course. Sloane wouldn't waste a moment. I stepped off the porch and into the rain, fully letting it soak through my clothes without reacting. Because this part mattered. Not for them, for me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the device. Compact, secure, no external markings. I held it in my hand for a second, feeling the weight. Then I pressed the first key. A short sequence. Deliberate. The screen lit up. I entered the code. No hesitation, no second guessing. Phase 2 initiated, I said quietly, my voice steady, controlled. Activate asset freeze. I hit confirm. The device processed for a second. Then the signal went out, invisible, immediate, irreversible. I lowered my hand and looked back at the house one more time, at the lights, at the windows, at the illusion they were still living inside. They thought they had just removed me. What they had actually done was remove the only thing keeping everything from collapsing. I lowered the device and slipped it back into my bag as the rain kept coming down like it had somewhere to be. Then I walked away. No hesitation, no second look. Because once a system starts moving, standing there watching it doesn't make it move faster. It just makes you look like you need the outcome more than you actually do. I checked into a different hotel that night. Smaller, quieter, no one asking questions. I took a long shower, changed into dry clothes, and sat at the desk with my laptop open, monitoring. Not actively interfering, just observing. Because phase 2 wasn't about noise. It was about pressure. The first indicators showed up within 12 hours. Minor flags, transaction delays, authorization reviews, nothing dramatic, yet. By the 24-hour mark, the pattern shifted. Accounts that had been active for years suddenly required verification. Lines of credit paused. Pending transfers held for compliance review. Still nothing obvious. Still nothing anyone in that house would recognize as a problem. That was the point. You don't shut the system down all at once. You tighten it slowly, evenly, until people start noticing something feels off, but can't explain why. By the time the 48th hour hit, everything was in place. I didn't need to be there, but I went anyway. Not inside. Just close enough. The house was lit up again, brighter than before. Music. Cars lined up along the drive, valet at the front, guests stepping out in expensive outfits laughing like nothing in the world could touch them. A celebration. Of course. Sloane wouldn't wait. She never did. I stood across the street just outside the edge of the property line, under a tree that did a decent job of keeping the rain off. The storm had passed, but the air still carried that heavy, wet quiet that comes after something breaks. Inside through the large windows, I could see everything. My mother moving between guests smiling too wide. My father near the bar again telling stories that sounded more confident now that he believed the future had been secured. And Sloane was in the center of it all. White dress again, different cut, same intention. She held a glass in one hand and her phone in the other, moving through the room like she owned not just the house, but the narrative. I watched her laugh, watched people lean in when she spoke, watched the illusion hold, for about 6 minutes. Then the first cracks appeared. A man near the bar frowned at the receipt in his hand. Small thing, easy to miss. He tried his card again, still nothing. He laughed it off, said something about bad signal, and pulled out another one. Declined. The bartender gave him that polite, uncomfortable smile professionals use when something isn't their fault but still becomes their problem. A second guest tried to open a tab. Same result. Now people were noticing. Not panic, just confusion. Sloane hadn't seen it yet. She was still across the room, mid-conversation, hand lightly touching someone's arm like she was sealing another connection. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, frowned, checked it again. I watched her posture shift. Just slightly, she turned away from the conversation, stepping toward a quieter corner. Answering. What do you mean declined, she said. Pause. No, run it again. Another pause. That's not possible. Her tone changed. Not loud yet, just sharper. I could almost hear the person on the other end explaining something she didn't want to accept. No, she said more firmly now. There's plenty of available credit. You're looking at it wrong. She pulled the phone away, stared at it like it had betrayed her, then put it back to her ear. Fix it, she said. Then she hung up, composed, almost. She turned back toward the room, smile returning, but it didn't land the same way. Too tight, too controlled. Meanwhile, near the bar, things were getting worse. 3 guests now, 4, cards not working, whispers starting. My father approached the bartender, confusion written all over his face. What's going on, he asked. Sir, the payments aren't processing, the bartender replied carefully. That's ridiculous, my father said. Run it again. He handed over his card. The bartender did, waited, then shook his head. I'm sorry, sir. That was when my father's confidence cracked. Not loudly, just enough. He pulled out his phone, stepping aside, already dialing. Across the room, my mother's smile started to falter as conversations shifted. People notice patterns, especially when money is involved. Sloane saw it now, all of it. She moved quickly toward the bar. What's happening, she demanded. Cards are being declined, my father said, trying to keep his voice low. That's not possible, she snapped, already pulling out her own card. Use mine. The bartender took it, ran it, waited, then looked up. I'm sorry, silence. This time it landed. Not confusion, not doubt, reality. Sloane stared at the machine like she could will it to change its answer. Run it again, she said. The bartender did. Same result. No, she said louder now. That's wrong. People were watching. Not openly, but enough. The kind of attention that shifts a room without anyone announcing it. Sloane grabbed her phone again, dialing faster this time. Call the bank, she said to my father, now. I am, he replied, already on hold. My mother stood frozen, smile gone, eyes moving between them, like she was trying to find the version of the night that made sense again. Sloane paced. 1 step, 2, turn. Then she stopped and dialed another number. This one mattered. I could tell by the way she held the phone, by the tension in her shoulders. Sterling, she said when it connected. Pause. Nothing. She frowned. Pick up, she muttered, pulling the phone away, checking the screen. then putting it back to her ear. It rang and rang and rang, then nothing, no answer. Just the long, empty tone that tells you the line isn't going anywhere. She pulled the phone away slowly, stared at it, then tried again, same result. Her breathing changed. Not panic, not yet, but close. "Where is he?" she said more to herself than anyone else. A man near her stepped closer. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Yes. Just a technical issue." Technical, that word always sounds safe. Until it isn't. Then one of the staff near the entrance froze, looked outside, and didn't move. I followed his line of sight. Headlights, multiple, black vehicles, clean lines, no markings, pulling up to the gate in a formation that didn't ask for permission. The gate opened. Of course it did. They always do. The cars rolled in slowly, deliberately, like they had all the time in the world. Inside, the music hadn't stopped yet, but the room had. Because even before anyone said anything, everyone felt it. That shift, that moment when a celebration stops being a celebration and becomes something else. Sloane turned toward the entrance. Her expression changed. Not confusion, not denial, recognition. Because somewhere deep down she understood one thing. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't bad timing. This was someone moving against her. And for the first time that night, she had no idea how to stop it. I stepped off the curb and crossed the street just as the first car door opened. The timing mattered. Not early, not late. Right when attention shifted. The engines went quiet one by one like someone had turned down the volume on the entire night. Doors opened in sequence. Boots hit the ground. No rush, no noise, just controlled movement. Military police. Even from a distance you could tell. Posture, spacing, awareness. They didn't look at the house like guests. They looked at it like a location. I walked up the driveway behind them, keeping pace, but not drawing attention. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked questions. At that moment, everyone's focus was on the same thing. The unknown had just arrived. Inside, the music cut out mid-song. Someone near the entrance must have seen enough to make a decision. Conversations died quickly after that. Glasses lowered, phones paused mid-scroll. The front doors opened, and the MPs walked in. Clean, direct, no hesitation. The room shifted immediately. You could feel it. Not fear, not yet, but structure. People stepped aside without being told. That instinct kicks in fast when authority walks into a room like it already owns the outcome. Sloane was the first one to react. Of course she was. She straightened, smoothed her dress, and walked toward them with that same confident smile she used on donors and officers who didn't know her well enough yet. Finally, something she understood. Authority. "Officers," she said, voice clear, composed. "I'm so glad you're here." That got a few looks, relief even. She thought they were there for her. Of course she did. "There's been some kind of issue with financial systems tonight," she continued smoothly. "I assume you've been informed." We were just about to. The lead officer didn't respond, didn't nod, didn't even slow down. He walked past her, just past her, like she wasn't part of the plan. That was the first real crack. Sloane turned slightly confused for the first time. "Excuse me," no answer. The MPs moved deeper into the house, positioning themselves with quiet precision. Not aggressive, not chaotic, just placed, blocking exits, controlling space. My father stepped forward, trying to recover control of the situation. "What's going on here?" he asked. Voice louder than it needed to be. Still no immediate answer, because this wasn't about explaining. It was about establishing. And then I stepped inside. No one noticed me at first. That was fine. I wasn't here for attention, not yet. I walked through the doorway at the same pace I had used all week, measured, controlled. Except this time I wasn't wearing anything that made me easy to dismiss. No plain blouse, no soft edges, uniform, pressed, clean, exact. Every line intentional. I didn't rush, I didn't scan the room, I just walked forward. And that's when Sloane saw me. Her eyes locked onto mine instantly, and for a second she didn't understand what she was looking at. Then recognition hit. Not of status, of me. And she laughed. Actually laughed. Sharp. Loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Well," she said, turning slightly so others could see. "Look who decided to show up." Heads turned. Attention shifted. This time toward me. I stopped a few feet away from her. Close enough. Neutral distance. What is this? She continued, looking me up and down. You thought putting on a uniform would make a difference? No response. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound personal, but still performative. Did you come back to beg? She asked. Still nothing. Because this wasn't a conversation. This was positioning. She turned slightly toward the officers, gesturing casually in my direction, like she was dismissing a problem. I'm sorry about this, she said. She's not supposed to be here. Then louder, MP, remove her. There it was. The assumption, the certainty, the belief that the system would respond to her. I didn't move, didn't react, didn't even look at the officers, because I didn't need to. For a second, nothing happened. And that second stretched just long enough for discomfort to settle in. Sloane frowned slightly. Did you hear me? She said, sharper now. She's not authorized to be here. One of the officers shifted. Not toward me, toward her. And that's when it broke. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them in two controlled movements. His hand came up, not aggressively, just enough to redirect her, and he pushed her aside. Not hard, not dramatic, just enough. Enough to make space, enough to make a point. Sloane stumbled half a step more from surprise than force. What are you doing? She snapped, anger finally cutting through the confusion. The officer didn't look at her, didn't explain. He faced forward and spoke clearly. Stand aside. 2 words, flat, final. Sloane's expression shifted again. Now it wasn't confidence or confusion, it was something else. Something closer to realization. Do you know who I am? She demanded. The officer still didn't look at her, because he wasn't talking to her anymore. He was talking to the room. Make way, he said. Then finally he said it. Make way for Colonel Miller. Silence. Not the soft kind, the heavy kind. The kind that lands all at once and doesn't leave room for interpretation. No one moved for a second, because no one processed it that fast. Colonel Miller. Then the shift happened. Heads turned, eyes widened, people stepped back. Instinct again. Authority recognized. I didn't change my expression, didn't acknowledge the reaction. I just stepped forward. And this time, no one was in my way. Not my father, who stood frozen near the bar. Not my mother, whose hand had slowly dropped to her side. Not the guest who suddenly found the walls very interesting. And not Sloane. She stood exactly where the officer had left her, still, staring. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't understand the room she was standing in. I walked past her without looking down, without stopping, without saying a word, because nothing I could say in that moment would have landed harder than what had already been said. And once a truth like that is out, it doesn't need help. I stopped at the center of the room and set my bag on the table like it belonged there. No rush, no speech, just a shift in control. Lock the exits, I said, calm, direct. 2 MPs moved immediately, doors secured, windows covered. No panic, no noise, just quiet compliance. That's the difference between chaos and command. Sloane finally found her voice again. This is insane, she snapped, stepping forward. You don't get to just walk in here and stop talking, I said. Not loud, just enough. And she did. Not because she respected me, because something in the room had already made that decision for her. I opened the bag and pulled out the tablet. Sleek standard issue, nothing flashy. I set it flat on the table and tapped once. The screen lit up. A simple interface. Files already queued. This isn't a misunderstanding, I said, looking around the room, not at any one person in particular. And it's not a technical issue. My father swallowed. Cassidy, what is this? I glanced at him briefly. You're about to find out. I tapped the first file. Audio. Clean. Clear. Sloane's voice filled the room. He signs whatever I put in front of him. Silence hit immediately, not confusion, recognition. My father's face drained. My mother shook her head slightly. That's not what she meant. The recording kept going. We transfer the house into the trust, get Dad into assisted living. Once that's done, she's out. Legally clean. No one spoke now, because there was nothing to argue with. That was her voice, her words. No editing, no distortion, just truth. Sloane laughed suddenly, sharp, forced. This is ridiculous, she said. You think some random recording? I tapped again. New file, different day, different conversation, same pattern, just need the signature. Witnesses are already arranged. No one will question it. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father took a step back. Like distance could change what he was hearing. Sloane crossed her arms. You recorded me in my own house. That's illegal. No, I said. What you did is illegal. I let that sit. Then I swiped again. Let's move to the financial side. New file, bank records, transactions, clean lines connecting accounts that weren't supposed to touch, military funds, procurement channels, redirected, layered, hidden just well enough to pass a casual audit, not well enough to survive a real one. Unauthorized transfers, I said. Multiple instances, routed through shell accounts tied to your personal expenditures. I glanced at her. This car, I added. Her jaw tightened. You have no proof that I zoomed in. Date, amount, account, purchase confirmation, everything aligned. The room stayed quiet. Because numbers don't argue, they just exist. My father shook his head slowly. Sloane, what is this? She didn't answer him. She looked at me, and for the first time, she wasn't smiling. I moved to the next file. Let's talk about your career. That got her attention, her eyes sharpened. Don't, she said. I ignored her. Medical records appeared on the screen. Clearances, evaluations, performance certifications. All stamped, approved, official. Until you looked closer. Your physical evaluation scores, I said, improved significantly in a 3-week period. I tapped once. Overlay, original report. Doctor's notes. Then the altered version, same date, different numbers. My mother frowned. What does that mean? It means I said someone was paid to adjust the record. Sloane stepped forward. That's not, I tapped again. Audio. A different voice this time. Male, doctor. I can update the file, but it needs to stay quiet. Sloane's voice followed. It will. The room didn't react loudly. It didn't need to, because now the pattern was complete. Forgery, fraud, bribery. And then the final piece. I brought up the last file, the one that mattered most. Major Sterling, transaction logs, communication records, internal flags. You didn't do this alone, I said. Sloane didn't respond, didn't deny it, didn't even try because she already knew. He's been under investigation for months, I continued. You just accelerated the timeline. My father looked between us, lost. Cassidy, what are you saying? I met his eyes. I'm saying this wasn't a mistake. I paused, then finished it. It was an operation. That landed. Not softly, not gently, just completely. My mother whispered, You knew about this. I built the case, I said. That was the moment. The exact second everything shifted for them. Not just what I had done, but who I was, not the quiet daughter, not the background support, not the one they could dismiss with a sentence and $100 bill. Something else. Something they had never even considered. My father's voice dropped. You're in charge of this. Yes. He didn't ask anything else, because he didn't need to. Sloane let out a breath, slow, controlled. Then she laughed again. Different this time. Less sharp. More desperate. You think this changes anything, she said. You think a uniform and some files make you better than me? I didn't answer. Because this wasn't about being better. It was about being finished. I nodded once. The MPs moved. 2 of them stepped forward, positioning on either side of her. Sloane turned sharply. Don't touch me. They didn't argue. They didn't explain. They just acted. Hands secured, cuffs on, clean, efficient, final. The sound of metal closing was quiet, but it carried. My mother gasped. My father didn't move. He just stood there staring at the moment like it hadn't decided what it meant yet. Sloane struggled once, then stopped. Because resistance without leverage is just noise. This isn't over, she said, looking straight at me. No, I replied calmly. It is. I stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough. Her bag was still on the chair behind her. I reached down, opened it, and found what I already knew was there. The watch, the compass, wrapped in fabric like they were just objects. I held them for a second, felt the weight, not financial, something else. Then I looked at her. Don't say our family name again, I said. No anger, no volume, just a boundary. She didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. The MPs turned her toward the door, guided, not dragged. And as they moved her out, the room didn't follow. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. Because sometimes when the truth shows up all at once, it leaves people exactly where they are. I watched the door close behind them and didn't stay for what came next. No cleanup, no explanations, no attempt to comfort anyone in that room. Because this wasn't the kind of situation you softened. It was the kind you walked away from. I picked up my bag, slipped the watch and the compass inside, and turned toward the back of the house. The noise behind me stayed low. Not silence, but something close. People trying to process what they had just seen without saying the wrong thing out loud. I stepped through the hallway, past the same walls that had held years of quiet disrespect. Past the same rooms where I had been reduced to something smaller than I was. None of it felt heavy anymore. Just finished. The back door opened with a soft click. Cool air hit my face as I stepped outside. The storm had passed. The ground was still damp, the grass dark under the night sky, but the air had cleared in that sharp, clean way that only happens after something breaks and resets at the same time. And there it was. The helicopter sat at the far edge of the lawn, engine idling low, lights steady, rotors cutting through the air in controlled rhythmic motion. Not loud enough to overwhelm, just enough to remind you that it was real. Behind it further out, I could see the outline of additional vehicles, Escort, Standard. Nothing about this was improvised. I started walking, step by step across the lawn, the sound of the blades growing stronger with each second. No hesitation, no looking back. At least not at first. Cassidy. My mother's voice. I stopped. Not because I had to. Because I chose to. I turned slightly. They were running toward me. My mother, first unsteady breath, uneven. My father just behind her, slower, but still trying to keep up. They didn't look composed anymore. No control, no structure, just reaction. Cassidy, wait, my mother said, reaching me first. She grabbed my arm, not aggressively, just enough to stop me from moving forward. Her eyes were wet, red, unsteady. We didn't know, she said quickly. We didn't understand what was happening. I looked at her. Really looked, for the first time that night. You didn't ask, I said. That landed harder than anything else I had said all evening. My father stepped closer, voice lower now, stripped of the confidence he used to rely on. You have to fix this, he said. Sloane, she meant exactly what she said. I cut in, no anger, just fact. My mother shook her head, gripping my arm tighter. She's your sister. I didn't respond right away, because that word didn't mean what they thought it did. She's in trouble, my father added. Serious trouble. You can help her. You have influence. Influence. That was what they saw now. Not me. Not who I had been all these years. Just what I could do for them. Again, my mother's voice broke slightly. Please, Cassidy, we'll fix everything. We'll make it right. Just don't leave us like this. Like this, as if this had just happened. As if it hadn't been building for years. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Not harsh, not cold, just final. I already fixed everything, I said. They didn't understand that either. Of course they didn't. My father took a step forward. Then help her, help us. We'll do whatever it takes. I looked past them toward the house. Still lit, still standing, still full of people who would leave soon and talk about this night like it was something they had witnessed, not something they had contributed to. Then I looked back at my parents. At the people who had decided over and over again what I was worth based on what I didn't show them. I'm not paying for this family anymore, I said. My mother flinched slightly. That's not what we're asking, yes, I said. It is. Silence. Not long, just enough. My father tried again. Cassidy, don't do this. I took a step back, creating space, because that mattered now. Then I turned and walked the rest of the way to the helicopter. The pilot gave a small nod as I approached. No words, no need. I placed one foot on the step, then paused. Not because I was unsure, because I had one thing left to say. I turned my head slightly, just enough for my voice to carry. I will never look down at where I came from again. Same words, same tone, just a different direction. This time they understood, not fully, but enough. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me with a solid, controlled sound, sealed. The outside noise dropped instantly, muted, contained. The pilot glanced back. Ready, Colonel? Yes, I said. The helicopter lifted smoothly, the ground pulling away without drama. No sudden movement, just elevation. The house grew smaller beneath us. The lights blurred slightly, then stabilized, then faded. I leaned back in the seat and reached into my bag. The watch, the compass. I held them both for a second, feeling their weight in a way that had nothing to do with time or direction. Then I set them aside and took off the small phoenix insignia pinned inside my jacket. Old, worn, a reminder of where I had started. I looked at it for a moment, then smiled, not because anything felt easy, because it was clear. I placed it down next to the watch. Outside, the horizon stretched wide and open. No walls, no rooms, no expectations built on someone else's version of me. Just distance and direction. If you've ever been the one holding everything together while everyone else took the credit, you already know this. Loyalty isn't something you prove by sacrificing yourself. And power isn't something people give you when you ask nicely. It's something you build quietly, protect carefully, and use only when it actually matters. So let me ask you this. Would you have walked away the same way? Or would you have stayed and kept paying for people who never planned to change? Tell me what you think. And if you believe that justice doesn't need to be loud, to be real, and that sooner or later it always shows up, make sure you subscribe. The strange thing about walking away is how quiet your life becomes after. No noise, no tension, no constant pressure to prove something you were never going to be allowed to prove anyway, just space. And at first that space doesn't feel like freedom. It feels empty, because when you've spent years being needed, silence can feel like rejection. No calls, no emergencies, no one depending on you to fix something they broke. For a while, I kept checking my phone, not because I wanted them to call, because I was used to it. That's the part people don't talk about. You don't just leave toxic environments, you detox from them. And detox isn't comfortable, it's quiet, it's unfamiliar, and sometimes it makes you question if you made the right decision. I had to learn something new in that silence. Peace and loneliness are not the same thing. They feel similar at first. Both are quiet, both remove noise, but one drains you, and the other restores you. The difference is what's missing. Loneliness is missing connection, peace is missing chaos. And if you've lived in chaos long enough, peace can feel wrong, like something is off, like you should go back just to feel normal again. Don't. That's how people get pulled back into situations they already escaped. Not because things got better, because silence made them uncomfortable. The next thing I had to rebuild was my sense of value, not based on what I could do for others, based on what I expected for myself. That's a different standard. For years, I measured my worth by usefulness, how much I could fix, how much I could carry, how much I could absorb without breaking. That's not strength, that's endurance. And endurance without boundaries just makes you easier to use. So I changed the metric. I stopped asking, am I helping enough? And started asking, is this acceptable? That one shift changes everything. Because now the focus isn't on proving your value, it's on protecting it. You don't earn respect by doing more. You maintain it by accepting less. Then came boundaries, not the idea of them, the enforcement. Because most people understand boundaries in theory, they just don't apply them consistently. I made mine simple, 3 categories: time, emotion, money, time first. Who gets access to me? Not everyone who wants it deserves it. Just because someone calls doesn't mean I answer. Just because someone needs something doesn't mean I'm available. Access is earned, not assumed. Emotion next. Who gets to affect how I feel? That one matters more than people realize, because some people don't need your time to control you. They just need your attention. If someone consistently brings stress, guilt, or pressure into your life, limit exposure. You don't have to fix them. You just have to stop absorbing them. And finally, money. This one is where most people get trapped, especially in families. If someone depends on you financially but doesn't respect you personally, that's not support. That's control. And the moment you remove it, you'll see exactly where you stand. That's why it's hard, but it's also why it's necessary. Here's the part that changed the way I move completely. Real power is quiet. Sloane needed attention. She needed validation. She needed people to see her winning. That's why she talked so much. That's why she performed. That's why everything she did had to be visible, because her power depended on perception. Mine didn't. Real power doesn't announce itself. It prepares, it observes, it waits. And when it moves, it doesn't need approval. That's the difference. If you have to keep telling people who you are, you're probably still trying to convince yourself. So if you're in a situation where people are taking more than they give, here's what I would tell you. Stop explaining yourself. You don't need everyone to understand your decision. You just need to make it. Reduce access, not dramatically, just consistently. Less time, less availability, less emotional exposure. Document everything. If money, property, or legal matters are involved, don't rely on memory. Keep records, facts don't argue. Build independence. Financial, emotional, mental. The more independent you are, the harder it is for anyone to control you. And finally, accept that not everyone will agree with you. Some people will call you selfish. Some will say you changed. Some will try to make you feel guilty for choosing yourself. Let them. Because the people who benefited from your lack of boundaries will always have a problem when you create them. That's not your responsibility. I didn't lose a family. I lost a system that needed me small. And once I understood that, I stopped trying to go back and fix something that was never designed to include me properly. I moved forward, on my terms, with my standards, and without the need to prove anything to anyone who had already decided who I was. So let me ask you this. Have you ever realized the people closest to you were the ones holding you back? And you stayed anyway? Why? And what would happen if you didn't? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe that respect matters more than familiarity, that peace is worth protecting, and that walking away can sometimes be the strongest move you make sure you subscribe.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.